You all to this kind of breakfast webinar or seminar on cybersecurity. And I first want to thank, number one, Empower and Altegro for, and the FBI for spending all their time and investing their efforts into making this presentation what the thoughtful and informative session that we're going to. This morning, we'll be talking about cybersecurity and what the current state of affairs is. It's not very pleasant, but better to know than not to know. I will let each of our panelists introduce themselves, but in short, we have Bill Rassier from the FBI Cyber Task Force, Steve Greenbaum from Altegro Pension Services, Trish McGinty, Head of Cybersecurity Communications at Empower, and Gary Young, who is my partner at Nandovan Barrett. And with that, you make me stand for 4 hours. Okay. Next thing is the phone. All right. So we are going to start with Trish.
Yes, I think so.
So, Trish, what's the most pressing matter on your mind today, right now?
Check, 1, 2, everyone. So, most pressing matter. Well, hello everyone, I'm Trish McGinty, Head of Cybersecurity Communications at Empower. A little tiny bit about me, I've been really passionate about cybersecurity for over 25 years. So I joke that makes me like a professional paranoid geek. But staying ahead of cybercriminals is really all I've done my whole career. So the most pressing matter on my mind right now, with regard to AI, or like Empower specific, or more like public domain? What do you think? Both? All right, so I would say Empower specific would be making sure that our associates, don't probably click on something to introduce some kind of malware to our environment. Empower has never had a cybersecurity breach, so that's probably one of the things that we're most concerned about internally, and then a lot of our plan sponsors or advisors, making sure that we can keep them safe as well. We provide them that education. And then in terms of just in general, first to our infrastructure probably, like the colonial pipeline, folks can't go get gas in the morning, fire trucks, ambulances, things like that. So I'd say that that's a pressing thing. And then I'd say overarching concern, I don't want to talk about artificial intelligence. I don't know how many people have seen that article from the gentleman in financial services in Hong Kong who they sent out a wire transfer for $25 million to his CFO. Did anyone hear about that article? A couple of people. So evidently this gentleman in Hong Kong got a phone call from his CFO and said, we need to have an instant, then we need to have a Zoom right now. So he jumps on the Zoom, and not only is it his CFO, it's a whole room full of associates that he knows on the Zoom call. And they're all telling him that we need to send this $25 million wire transfer. So that is a deep fake, right? So that is artificial intelligence deep faking your entire persona or your associate's persona. So that's, I would say that kind of blew my mind a little bit. I can understand maybe a deep fake of one person. I've heard of those examples before, where someone like takes your voice, or your likeness, but just have the Zoom room full of like your associates, I'd say that was probably.
So really what you're saying is think of the latest movie that has wonderful animation of realistic looking people in it, and just stick in all of your workers and all of your bosses and all of your associates and all of your clients, and have some fun. All right, so this is a good segue. Can you start by describing what we call basic risks, cybersecurity risks of a 401k plan? Are there really bad actors? Are there? I guess you made that perfectly clear. Why don't you elaborate a little bit?
Absolutely. So, Cyber Crime Magazine said that in 2023, the global cost of cybercrime was $8.4 trillion US, and the global cost of incidents caused by cybercrime on the internet is set to surpass the $10.5 trillion US mark So if measured as a country, cybercrime would be the world's third largest economy after the US and China, with Germany being far fourth. And 43% of those attacks target our small and mid-sized businesses. The rest are targeting our enterprises and our government. So the threats are real, but sometimes I've been known to wear a cape on stage because I don't want cybersecurity to be daunting, right? I want folks to know that there are things that you can do to protect yourself, your accounts, protect your business. And so we can talk about those as well. But yes, the threats are real, ransomware gangs are real. So, it's really important that we do take prudent steps to make sure that we don't become victim of ransomware or some kind of cyber threat.
So let's get a bit technical. And can you describe the difference, explain the difference in simple terms, especially simple like or between SOC 1 and SOC 2?
Yes. So SOC reports are on the compliance side, right? So there's also testing that you can do, and you need both to make sure you have a really good cybersecurity program. So on the compliance side, you have a SOC 1 report. That is for financial reporting. We've had our SOC 1 for financial reporting at Empower, being a financial services organization, for decades. And then in the last 5 years, we've got our SOC 2. That's for IT and security. So that is super important. So that's when you have an audit firm, like the Big Four, so we have Deloitte come in every year for 6 months minimum out of the year, and they come in, they test the controls that we give them, and we have an unqualified report. So the cliff notes to understand if there's a company that you're doing business with, if they have a SOC 2, do they have a qualified report? Bad. Unqualified? Good. So you want to see that they have an unqualified report from their auditor. If they do have qualifications, you want to ask what those were and what the company is doing to remediate those. So SOC 2, IT security, that's good, but then you also have to test those controls as if that actually were tried. So we do that with third-party security assessments. The Department of Labor said we conduct prudent annual risk assessments, and we've been exceeding that guideline for 12 years. We hire Verizon Business, yes, the same folks that are the cell phone company. They're also global cybersecurity experts, and they come in and they test us, our risk assessments on a quarterly basis. So that's really important to do. And so we're really proud to be Verizon Cyber Trust Certified Enterprise now for 12 years. We also do penetration testing, dark web monitoring, all that just to test our defenses like that after we're trying to do.
So we're talking about pieces of microphone falling off. We're talking about risk, but in order to know that you have risks, you just mentioned risk assessment, right? Why do a risk assessment? I mean, what doesn't cost money? Isn't this something that you know what's going on, and so you have locker doors, and I have McAfee. Isn't that enough? Or my IT person says we have a firewall.
Yes, all those are good fundamentals to have, but I think every organization should probably define what the amount of risk is to their organization, and it comes from the top. That's governance, right? Governance, risk, and compliance, and so it's really important. And even with regard to artificial intelligence, we have an AI committee. We have risk assessments of our AI as well, and we have risk policies, right, to make sure that we're looking out for the best interests of our clients, of our stakeholders, and of our associates, our employees. So it's really important that we look at everything from the standpoint of risk.
And let me interrupt. If anybody has any questions, this is an interactive session, so raise your hand, ask. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So whatever you want to know, now's the time.
There are no stupid questions. You can ask me about password managers or anything like that.
So if you have, yes, sure, go ahead. Well, let us rush a microphone to you.
What legal responsibility does a plan sponsor have to their plan for cybersecurity? So let's say, for example, I have a client of mine that's got a plan with Empower, and they have a TPA, LTGRO, and we're following all of the protocol. What legal responsibility does the plan sponsor have to protect the 401k and its plan participants from cybersecurity attacks?
I'm going to give this over to my esteemed partner, Gary Young. Let him answer that. We're a little out of Out of sequence, if this is okay, any questions you have, welcome.
Well, that's a great question. And in actuality, one of the reasons why we're doing this morning is to help people to become aware of their exposure from a legal liability point of view. So, you know, ERISA was the watershed pension legislation that the government passed in 1974. And one of the things that they did, they introduced the concept of fiduciary responsibility, which prior to that was not part of the landscape when it came to pension plans. So, a fiduciary has personal liability if they breach their duty, and there are various duties, including loyalty. The one I would think about the most is prudence. The prudent expert standard is what they call it today. Ultimately, you're obliged to be at least knowledgeable and take whatever action possible to protect the plan assets and the pensions of the participants. So, in your package, you have tips, as the Department of Labor determined, of things that you should be doing to protect the plan. And that includes, you know, the best practices in terms of interaction with plan participants, discipline in terms of accessing plan information, safeguarding personal information, social security numbers, etc. All these things get jumbled into this mix of responsibility. If you have not taken those actions that are prescribed by the Department of Labor, and something bad happens to your plan, you could very well be personally liable as a fiduciary. Of course, hopefully you have ERISA liability insurance, and hopefully you have cyber liability insurance, and that you've also taken these actions. But this is exactly why we're doing this today, make people aware of this. And by the way, the Department of Labor came out with those tips 3 years ago. So this is not new news. Okay? It may be politically learned news, but hopefully better later than not at all. So that's it.
And then I'd like to just pivot off of what Gary just said. And so what we do with our plan sponsors who request it is we do once per year an annual cybersecurity conversation, because it's really important for our advisors and plan sponsors to do that together. And so I talk with them 20, 30 minutes, however long they want. We can talk about our cybersecurity programs. So it's really important to understand your third-party risk, and the Department of Labor mentions that as well, right? And so understand what your partners are doing. And so anyone who's handling your personally identifiable information, I would say maybe have an annual and document it, like, you know, as a committee meeting, with, you know, your notes and Robert's Rules of Order and all that stuff.
Thank you for that. There's a little, as a follow-up to that. My practice, again, on the legal side of cybersecurity counseling, both pre and post incident. The standard is a reasonable person standard. And it's an objective standard. It's not what you would do. It's what that third person, abstract person who's not you, under similar circumstances would consider reasonable. That's usually determination that's made in court. And that's not what you want that determination made. What we counsel our clients is how to make your plan, how to make your infrastructure defensible. Right? How do you make it not only defensible, but resilient? And so, you know, having someone like Trish come in and talk about what it is you have, interview, interrogate, you know, from top to bottom, what their entire network looks like, or what your system looks like is incredibly important these days. We spent a lot of time talking about educating participants. What's in everybody's mind right now?
For educating participants, the number one thing that the Department of Labor and Power both agree on, if we could get a participant, right, all of us are participants in our own thing, participants to do just one thing, believe it or not, is to register their accounts, their financial accounts. Why? All of our financial accounts are online, right? And by register, I just mean going on the website, like creating a username, a password, beneficiary information, etc. If the authentic person doesn't put their username and their password and their bank account, you're not going to get security alerts when a bad actor goes in and puts their username and their password and their bank account trying to take money out of the account. So believe it or not, if you get a participant to do just one thing, is to register their account. And there are reasons why people don't register their account. They might not have it like for 401k, for retirement plans, right? Maybe they don't have a big balance, they're so far away from retirement, or maybe they think it's safer not to log in, but that can't be further from the truth. The account's already online, and it's really important to register.
Good question.
I don't understand you saying register the account.
Question is, what is register the account?
Yeah, like, so the Power, or like your Chase account, your Wells Fargo account, any financial services company that you do business, your E-Trade, anything. But we do retirement plans, and so a lot of times people like, retirement plans used to be said, forget it, so people didn't go and register their account, and I'm just saying, username and password on the website. Go claim that account and put your contact information, so if there's any changes, we can alert you of any changes to your account.
But with who? I don't understand. Who do you register the account?
You just go to our website,
On your website.
on our website.
I know.
Yeah, just our website. So if you have a plan with the Power, if your retirement accounts are with the Power, just go to power.com and go register your account. So do that for all your retirement, like especially because your average checking account has about a $3,000 balance. Your average 401k has well over $100,000. So it's really, and the unfortunate thing is retirement accounts have become so much more of a focus area for cyber criminals. So it's really important to go register all of your retirement accounts. Does that make sense?
So let's do a public service announcement.
Okay.
I'm sure you ask this all the time. How many people know what multi-factor authentication is? How many people don't? How many people are using multi-factor authentication? Yes, that is great. A couple of years ago, if I said this, we asked this, I would have gotten glazed looks from everybody's eyes. Remember, that's probably one of the most important things you can do to protect your accounts. You're not writing a password on those CDs that you're not monitoring.
And I would use MFA for all your financial accounts, all your email accounts, and specifically your cell phone account with AT&T, Verizon, whoever your carrier is. I would use MFA, and then also you can also call your carrier and get a special passphrase that only you know to have it never be ported. Because now that MFA can be sent to your phones are becoming more of a target for cyber criminals.
And because passwords are becoming necessarily more complex, or they're required to be more complex when you enter them, the follow-up question is, how many people are using password managers? A little fewer. So password managers are basically applications that basically aggregate all of your passwords, create really complex passwords. You have one master password that you hopefully want to keep in your head, and which you have a recovery for that only you can access. But what that lets you do is that lets you not only create really complex passwords, but really change those really complex passwords as often as you need to without wondering whether or not that was you or a double in that password.
Super important because artificial intelligence can be used for good, it can be used for bad. If you have a password with less than 8 characters, it can be cracked instantly, which is, it's crazy.
I think 10 characters is
12
yeah, 12 characters
is
is
what
really
was
minimal.
suggested, so I don't want to remember 12 character passwords for all my accounts. So that's why password manager is such a good idea. And CNET.com, Power doesn't endorse any of these password managers specifically, but CNET.com is a great research organization. Every year they come out with the best password managers. Their top one is Bitwarden, it's the best free one. You just go to Google, CNET.com, best password manager 2024. So Bitwarden, 1Password, and then Keeper.
LastPass had a problem, but 1Pass,
You got
there are plenty of them out there.
LastPass got demoted. Yes.
You have a question? Yes.
Just wanted to get your opinion on facial recognition.
Opinion on facial recognition.
Facial recognition is wonderful. It is not, it should not be used as the only authenticator because it's biometric and biometrics can be duplicated and counterfeited. So facial recognition is nice. If you look at NIST has some regulations which basically say that yes, if you use my phone, my iPhone's unlike my phone, that shouldn't be good enough to access your bank account. Right? You can enable the facial recognition, but it has to be in conjunction with something else.
I would say limit the amount of people that have your biometrics. So even going through TSA yesterday, I opt out of facial recognition just because, well, one, I'm a professional parent ID, but I just want to limit the amount of people that have access to my biometric information. Just in the, like, limit the amount of companies I do business with, limit the amount of people that have access to your emails. You're gonna limit the amount of, like, your blast radius, right? So I think it's really important to limit the amount of people that have your PII.
So talk a little bit about how, where you are, where Empower is, and where pension plans, 401ks are in the supply chain. We all think about supply chain, we think about materials or whatever. There's a services supply chain too, isn't there? And you're part of it. And,
Yes.
and all of these participants in the supply chain have to be protected.
Yes, they do, absolutely. So I think it's really important that that we do everything we can, and we look at, we try to limit the amount of data that we put out, that we provide. We will share their information directly with our clients. We'll share information with our advisors. But those work clients, partners, advisors, partners who we don't have relationships with, we don't want to give our information to everybody. So we really limit that because we're a part of that supply chain. Is that an answer in terms of, it's really important to do your due diligence on your third parties.
That's right. And we're talking about vendor due diligence, and so when you select a partner to provide services, whatever those services are, because you're exchanging information with them, you're exchanging sensitive information, not only financial information, but other information, social security numbers, addresses, email addresses, et cetera, which can get you in trouble other ways. It really pays to do your due diligence, and with firms like Empower, and I know financial interest in Empower, having someone who's as deeply embedded in security as Trish should give you the kind of comfort level that you can say, yes, I can do business with that person. But again, due diligence is where it's at.
Absolutely, you want to encrypt your data in motion, right, back and forth between your communications at rest as well. And it's really important to have encryption of email. And so, if you're a Microsoft shop or a Microsoft shop, that's encrypted. It's called opportunistic, but what we do is set up that forced tunnel. So every email we send back and forth between our organizations is automatically encrypted. It's free. It takes like less than 24 hours to set up. So that's a really important thing. Forced email encryption.
Any other pointers, best practices?
For organizations, I'll just say do your due diligence, right? The Department of Labor at GoBack, they have 6 tips for plan sponsors on how to select a service organization like Empower with strong cybersecurity practices. I would go through and check mark all those 6. And it's good to use with us, but it's also probably good to use with anyone else that you're sharing personally identifiable information with.
Great. Trish, thanks so much. This has been really informative.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right. Next up is William Grassier from the FBI Cyber Task Force. I'll let him provide his own background because it's got a whole page on it, but I'll let him do his own introduction.
Thank you. Good morning. Appreciate the invitation to this training. I started off in public accounting as a CPA and came in and did that for about 8 years. After that, I transferred to the Bureau. I worked in a number of different offices. I started off in New York and then transferred out to Los Angeles, headquarters, back to New York, close to home. But when I left the Los Angeles office, I wanted to congratulations to be the first person to take a voluntary transfer to New Jersey. But As far as a little bit about, no, yeah, I'm running on a little bit, but go into ransomware a little bit.
Roll.
As far as the ransomware, what is unique with that is typically the ransomware was by variant. So I mentioned Scanner Fire, you might have heard Lockbit, Kira, Alpha, Black Hat. What Bureau typically handles that is each field office will work a particular ransomware. So even though you might have a company in New Jersey, let's say, and get hit by ransomware, the subject matter expert for the company that actually handles that particular ransomware investigation might be somewhere else. And I'll go over that a little bit later, but that's helpful because you can get to the particular people that know the investigation the most. They know as far as your IOC's indications of compromise, what the IP addresses that are used by the threat actors, emails, who's over IP, tools that are used for intrusion, called TTPs, tactics, techniques, procedures, how they were actually able to get into your system. So those are the things that usually one of the discussions are very helpful. And then of course, unfortunately, ransomware.
So, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in ransomware? I think it's important to know that from my practice's perspective, ransomware is kind of the end of the road in a cyber attack. Because by the time you've been hit with ransomware, you've had all your valuable information sucked down and offered for sale in the dark or deep web. But what are you seeing? What are recent trends? Because you're about closest to the fire as anybody else in this area.
I think, as far as I understand, we call them right after the cyber war. I don't know why we don't just subjects in every other investigation we work with fancy name. The threat actors are typically working in groups. So what you'll have is unfortunately, a lot of young individuals, typically under 18, that are in the cyber world. They might get involved in Discord, criminal forums that go on, and might initially get interested as far as, let's say, trying to steal someone's crypto out of their exchange account. Then from there, they'll develop expertise as far as further intrusion, use of tools, being able to compromise identities. So as far as a trend, we've seen them work in groups. So you might have someone that is the initial access broker that just obtains information on a company to all the intelligence. Then you have someone that is able to help with the social engineering or phishing, and then you'll have someone that does intrusion and actual ransom. And when you have this unique set of people that can almost work as a team, and they can also outsource online. So someone will say, hey, I need a folder, or I need a call, or I use these X, Y, and Z. These forms make it a very effective team that can then intrude on the company. But I think, to answer the question, social engineering would be one of the biggest trends we've seen. So even Tricia's mentioned things like ERs and detection response system.
Let's step back because everybody here knows what EDR is. Explain the endpoint protection. This is really, really important, I think. I think that a lot of people, even with protections that they're taking, don't realize what endpoints actually mean. I'll give you guys a hint.
So the endpoint that a typical company accounts would just be any endpoint user that they use. So if you're sitting in front of your laptop, that's one endpoint. You're sitting in front of the desktop, the second laptop.
Be a phone, be any device that receives and transmits information through the endpoint.
Yeah. So all these are risks, all these are vulnerabilities that come in. What we've seen in some of the investigations is, even though we talked about the higher level technology is there, it's often defeated by the more weakest link, which of course is us humans, the human element. So typically you'll have, let's say you get an SMS, text on your phone, ID, maybe you don't, you're not sure what escalate or privilege you have, then from there you can work to escalate privilege and try to find whether ultimately looking for these valuable data such as insurance.
We'll talk about privilege later on. Also, we'll talk about one of my favorite topics, which is role-based access control, which means you get to touch only what you're supposed to touch and nothing else in the system. But getting back to endpoints a little bit, public service announcement number 2. How many people have network printers in your office? Network printers, good. Do you encrypt the information on that network printer? Are they leased? Well, how many of them are leased? Raise your hand. Nobody leases network printers, nobody will buy them. When you use them, you lease these devices, you have to turn them back at the end of the lease. But network printers have little hard drives in them or SSDs in them that take pictures of everything you have printed out, right? Everything that you printed out, or scanned for that matter. So when these go off lease, unless you protect that information in that printer, either by encrypting it and throwing away the key or just wiping that drive, you're exposing client information. All right, so you really have to be very, very careful. That includes, by the way, when you swap out your laptops, when you get them repaired, when you basically give away, unless you chuck your hard drives. I tend to drill my hard drives with a metal drill. But you really have to be careful about where you leave your garbage storage, right? Because it's to you it may be garbage and old and obsolete. To other people, it is a gold mine.
When the threat actor gets in, a lot of times they will use a VPN. However, some companies have whitelisted or blacklisted certain IP addresses that can come in. So if it's something very unique, VPN maybe will be blocked. However, of course, always we talk about one step ahead of us. There's something called residential proxies that can be used for some threat actors who look like a typical IP address from a major ISP carrier. That looks like it's a residential proxy, it's just an individual, it's not really a VPN. However, the threat actor is a proxy for another network before they get to the government network. I talked about that escalation of privilege as well, but also the threat actor. And if I use a company name, it's just an example. I don't want to make sure I'm not picking on any companies, but it's after Optus will sign on or Microsoft. The threat actor will add rogue identities, fake employees, maybe employees that used to be with the company no longer there. So they're basically continuing backups, other ways to get in. So the company does try to address the problem and terminate certain accounts that they believe is compromised. The threat actor will already and also bring in 3, 4, 5, maybe even more accounts that they can use back or they can back in. Your ultimate goal is that information. These threat actors and ransomware still are encrypting systems, some, which is especially if it's on a hospital or some type of organization that provides repair can be damaging. But that's typically not what the value is for them anymore. There is burdens to decrypt the information, but really what they look to do is exfil data that they believe the company finds to be sensitive and usually done through like an S3 bucket, using ETL and extract, transform load type tool onto it.
So I think that I get it. Sure, that's it. I think when we talk about S3 buckets, we're getting a little escalated in terms of terminology, but basically we're saying storage areas where this information can be stolen from, right, and used. Let's bring this down to earth for a second. I want to talk about CDK, and you think, car dealers. Why do car dealers worry about cybersecurity? And CDK, you're familiar with CDK? CDK is the largest servicer of automobile dealer service and sales platforms. 15,000 car dealerships have been hit by it, including one of my clients. And guess what? They have to resort to doing everything by paper, right? Where everything else, all the service, warranty claims, all the service claims, all the parts orders, all of the business flow that they have has been totally disrupted while CDK is offline, and they're still offline. They are promising to get back online. They have to get online on Change Health, which I'm sure you've all heard as well. Change Health affected doctors and medical providers, medical service providers, much the same way, where the submission of business flow so that these businesses can stay in business and get paid for what they do and order services and whatever, completely disrupted. And the idea here is that, number one, you do it for fun, if you're a script kiddie or a threat actor from another nation, perhaps, but it is something which keeps on giving. And this is one of the problems that we have. It leads us to CDK. This is 2 days old.
Well, I didn't know the actual name because I actually had to take my Ford in for leaking coolant, and they said we can't order any parts right now because our systems are totally down. So I guess I was affected.
No, everybody's been. So look at the supply chain, all right? CDK, this obscure entity that provides digital services to car dealers, that provides services to us. You can't get your tire changed, all right? That you're the end of that supply chain, and that's who it affects. And ultimately, it has a ripple effect through the entire economy, apart from all the fraud and all the other items. The FBI has been able to break a couple of these ransomware games. When they do, they've also gained access to the decryption keys to help affected companies and clients. And I guess it would people here.
Yes, we have to use the lockbit as an example. Very public information out there as far as the contact, the FBI, the encryption codes. The system is encrypted, lockbit is threat actors, and it's still focused a good amount on encryption rather than just external.
So getting back to that. Oh, question. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so my question is, a lot of us work with clients and work with, have some sort of sensitive information. Now let's say a scenario came around where there's a phishing attempt and a threat actor access your email. It was found, seek remedy, taken care of. But some of that personal information, they were in the email, there could be even encrypted email that had social security or contact information, say nothing happened. What period of time do you need to be aware of a potential threat coming after the event?
That's a great question because that was going to be my next comment. That is the delta between a compromise and the discovery that an attack had been breached. I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, it can be weeks between when an actual compromise happens and when the threat actor is actually discovered. In your instance, it just depends how much information you have in your email. Some people keep passwords and usernames in their email, so obviously right away you want to do a password reset on all your devices. And then we already talked about multi-factor as well. Multi-factor is compromises password. We moved from the SMS multi-factor to biometrics, and then ultimately I think we're going to move to something old, like an RSA, a UEP, something that's physical. And I know it's expensive, and obviously that costs a lot of money, but if you think about what's in your head, the password, it's part of your biometrics, facial scanning, and then something that you actually physically need to have that has a number on it, or you put it as USB or thumbprint. I think those secondary levels of that would keep people comfortable even if somebody's able to get in. And then in your case, if it's a personal email or email, just protocol students, shut that down and restart it.
One thing you have to know where your information, where your sensitive information is kept. If you receive sensitive information from an email account and you think your email account has been hacked. There's all of those remedial measures that we need to take that Bill was talking about is important, but there are also laws in various states, almost every state, where if that information has been either accessed or exfiltrated, we say exfiltrated information travels the barn, but some states, including my state area of Florida, an intrusion into the system is enough, with enough people involved, to require you to notify the state that there has been a breach, that there's been an intrusion. Not only that, you may have to notify all the people whose information has been accessed, and then maybe, perhaps, even give them what's called credit monitoring, like Lifeline, always heard about Lifeline. So you have to be really careful about where you start putting that sensitive information. And what sensitive information? An email address and a password, social security number, driver's license number, any medical information that you have. You know, stuff that is readily identifiable. So the idea that you can freely just transmit because it's easy, all this information. Don't tell somebody to scan their driver's license and email. It's probably the worst thing in the world, because then if your email system gets hacked, somebody has driver's license information, passport, birth certificate, you name all of these things that would help people create what I call digital doppelgangers, people who can imitate or represent that they are you and then take money from you in the end. So one thing I do, I teach cybersecurity law to lawyers, to law students. Surprise, surprise, law school that I teach at realized that there's a need for it. And one of the things that we teach is that there are layers of multi-factor authentication. It's not only the password and the login. So what we say is it's something you have, something you know, and something you are. Something you are is a biometric, something you have is a key fob that you might have with the numbers and changes all the time, and something you know is that passphrase that you keep in your head. So, best practices.
Yep. I think when you mentioned the data, segmentation of data is just critical as far as making sure the company knows where its most important data is. Or like in your situation, email, a lot of times we are mixing certain information in there, and some people also include personal information in their work email, which especially for high-level executive, gets compromised, they can be pretty critical damage to the company. Identification of weaknesses, we see a lot of vendors, new subsidiaries, contractors, they might be all parts of the company, so not actually part of the company, but pieces that have usernames and passwords, maybe that haven't been disabled. So we see a lot of that, there's weak links, so also identifying those weak links that might be out there. And then if you can, there's encryption services obviously out there for the most sensitive data. And then when I mentioned previously about SIM swapping and changing over the SMS, you can with your carrier usually typically go along and say do not report the phone and try to make it as just difficult as possible for someone to do it. But obviously if someone walks in with that identification to the store, it's still as possible for that to occur. So I think those are some of the weak areas we see in some of the areas that we take some steps.
So to close out, what in an investigation, what can the FBI do, and what does the FBI not do? What can't it do in connection with an investigation when something is reported?
Yeah, we'll definitely focus on the scope of the crime, so we're not there to then look into other violations. Obviously, we'll treat the company as a victim, victim's rights. Typically, we do work with outside counsel at the same time, because obviously everyone knows there's both civil liability as well, so we typically work with them. As far as obviously we don't send information to the media, it's the company's responsibility for any regulatory requirements for them to follow. It's not the FDA's responsibility. And then also, Tricia mentioned whether it's cyber insurance or an incident response company, it's good to have that plan. We do have resources where we have a team that's called a CAD team that deploys, but typically it is not the FBI job to repair the system, to get the systems back up. My old boss used to use an example, it's, unfortunately, if your home got burglarized, the police do not come and fix your TV, and we can get everything back in order. It's the same thing, unfortunately, in terms of a white collar incident like a cyber intrusion.
Does the FBI have a web-based sources of information for tips and advice on how to practice safe cyber?
Yeah, I think some of the joint cybersecurity JCSAs, a lot of that will come through CISA, CISA, and DHS, and then of course in your local town or state, wherever you're at, the local agencies as well also produce a lot of good information. And then of course, incident response companies as well put out intelligence. So I think using the collection of those pieces.
There's a wealth of information out there to educate yourself with, which is, I think, the message here. Any questions before we take a break? How many people get a chance to question the FBI? Oh, we have a question at the panel.
Just curious, I didn't hear something that gets bandied about quite a bit these days called AI. I'm just wondering, how does AI impact the risk that we're taking with all this computers and systems and everything else?
Mark, go ahead, we can talk about that.
We'll talk a little bit as well.
We talked about AI a little bit, but AI, I would go ahead and establish a governance committee, establish what their policies are, and they have a committee, a steering committee that's addressing those and testing AI in a responsible manner.
So one thing we'll talk about this in the legal part is, it's a little esoteric. When your vendors are providing you these digital services, they're also using your information. They're using, they may be using parts of your client information to do their own business intelligence. The ultimate question, this has not been answered yet, is whether or not your clients have consented to the use of their information by your vendor in its business intelligence activities. And that's still not, and that's something you should ask about, because if for some reason there's a problem with the vendor and there is an exfiltration of your client's information, you'll probably be in the lawsuit soon. And we'll talk about that later.
We're also using AI for fraud detection, and we're also using it for deepfake technology. So we need to use, if our perpetrators are using AI, we need to use AI to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of the perpetrator. And a great point that I would limit my voice as my password at this point, because within 2 months of ChatGPT coming out, Microsoft, with a 3-second clip of your voice, could simulate your voice so that your friends and family would not be able to tell the difference. So Empower does not use my voice as my password for password, and it's just another biometric that can be stolen.
And while you'll be able to perhaps at one point have technology that can detect deepfakes, it's not very widely available right now, and 2, it's not really that reliable. So we have a question that type of thing.
And I have a question for the FBI agent. So I had a client who, bad actor, came in, somehow got their signature because they were doing a mortgage application. And they used you sign on the pad, right? So somehow the bad actor got their signature, was able to open phony bank accounts in the person's name, then took the signature, filled out forms, an IRA with this signature, faxed it. Luckily it was stopped, but I mean, is that cyber fraud or is that just fraud?
That's cyber fraud.
I'll tell you that without the
Well, I would probably kick that case to our white collar squad. No, it just depends on if there's actually a computer intrusion. So obviously, like Stephen mentioned, at the highest level is cyber fraud. But at the same time, was there a particular intrusion? How was that misappropriation of the signature occurred? Either way, in that instance where, I think we've all tried to take these mitigation steps is, freezing your credit would be one way. or having a hold on it. So in this instance, if someone did misappropriate what I would call your KYC, your know your customers, and then provide these in terms of signature, and we're trying to open up accounts where credit was frozen, it should be able to open up any accounts.
John, you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, we all get spam calls, and those spam calls, I've heard a rumor that when you pick up and you just use your voice, and you just say hello, no one's here, that's enough to develop a profile. Is that true? That's what that's being used for, or is it just spam?
I wouldn't answer the phone with a yes. I think hello might be a little safer. Typically, if somebody doesn't say hello to you on the phone, there's usually this period of time where they detect that you're not a robot, they can real life line, and then you're forced into saying something, and then you get the sheriff from Nottingham County asking you for Robin Hood's contribution. But typically, just saying hello, it's tough. It's tough. You're answering your voicemail. It's not your voice, am I correct?
No, I let, the
You get the
voicemail.
robot to say.
Right, I don't even have my voice on my voicemail. And I would limit what I put on social media, for sure.
So social media, everybody's using social media. We'll talk about this, but between TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese, and Instagram, whatever, you're just feeding the machine, all right? And this is, it's a feeding frenzy by threat actors to gather this information to basically engage in identity compromise, which is where this thing is all based. I think we're about out of time, am I right? And I'm going to take a 10-minute break, get a coffee, whatever, and we'll be back. So welcome back for the last half of this session. What I had omitted to do was let Trish tell you a little bit about Empower. She's one of our sponsors. Tell a little bit about their business and what they do and how they do it. And Trish, go ahead and let us know.
Sounds good. How many people have heard of Empower? Okay, that's probably about 50%. And so, by the way, we have Sean and Randall also with Empower back here. Those are my associates. So Empower is the second largest record keeper. So we are a record keeper. Our brand was established in 2014 when JP Morgan, Putnam, and Great West got together. We have 18 million participants, and we cover 1.6 trillion in assets under administration. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But so that's a little bit about Empower. We have about 13,000 associates. We're headquartered in Denver, but we have a lot of different office locations in Boston, and Chicago, and all over the place. So anything else I should add about Empower? If you have any other questions about Empower, we have Randall and Sean in the back. But I just, during the break, some folks came up and actually didn't know what Empower did. And then my role is I'm head of cybersecurity communications. I was hired to do, our chief information security officer was doing, spending 50% of his time doing my presentations and talking about our cybersecurity program. So it's hard to do that and also create some of the content that you have here in your books. So yes, sometimes people think it's just a fiduciary checkmark to talk to folks in cybersecurity. So I do that as well as do really fun events like this. And it was actually from Madison, New Jersey. So it was really wonderful to invite me back here to come to my song. So
Great, thanks. And both Trish and Bill have agreed to continue participating in this. So if you have additional follow-up questions, please feel free to ask. And I've invited them to talk as much as they want, or interrupt us, because we're just lawyers, as much as they would like. So this session is going to be a mixture of law and other. So let me introduce first Stephen Greenbaum from Altegro Pension Services. Let me give him a little background about what he does, and then we'll move on to my partner here.
We call a lot of things, but we call other people. Thank you. I'm one of the owners of Altegro Pension Services. We've been doing in-house pension plan design and administration since 1974. What I want to talk about and how I'd like to go about it is to discuss, as a business owner, how we look at cybersecurity and how the Department of Labor now says we should look at cybersecurity. And also, when I look at clients and I try and help them determine how they have to deal with the Department of Labor suggested, I think they call it suggested, best practices that they should be doing to protect themselves. So, if I might, because I'm going to deviate a little bit from the questions, because
Perfect. No, go right ahead.
I thought about more while I was listening than I was able to with the questions. So anyway, first I'd like to ask anybody in the room, if you're a business owner, do you deal with remote employees? Okay. Well, more and more in my industry, you need to deal with remote employees because since COVID, a lot of people decided, that's it, I'm going to retire, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and that's it. So all of a sudden, the pool of people is very, very, very small, and the third-party administration firms around the country have a lot of difficulty finding help. So we are dealing with remote employees, which that's easy to hire somebody and they have 10 years experience, they know what they're doing, hopefully they know the software that they use, or that's a requirement. But then the problem comes in after you hire them, what kind of security did they have on their system? So now we have to provide a laptop for them or a PC with all of our hardware and software protections on it because we don't know what they have at home. And can you show me a picture of where you're going to operate this thing? If it's going to be in your kitchen, I don't think I'm interested because I see you have kids running around and it's not really a professional thing, even though they're not client facing, although most of them are now. It becomes a problem. But most important was the cybersecurity and the people that couldn't communicate with us properly. They couldn't figure out how to use the VPN to get into our network and servers. So that's become an issue. Also for clients that I deal with, it's not an issue going forward. But what we also found out was that we got on the train, so to speak, on the early side with training our employees for phishing. There's companies out there that can help you train your employees to acknowledge or to figure out or to scope out phishing attempts to get into hack their email. Two of our clients over the last couple of years were hacked through their email. One was pre-COVID. They were with a record keeper that no longer does record keeping. They actually sold their business to Empower. The email from the office manager got hacked, and it was sent to the record keeper that said that it was a pooled account and they wanted $300,000 for a particular participant. And what happened was the HR person just so happened a few minutes after that request came in and was taken care of, logged into the system, and saw that $300,000 just left the plan. She called me up and she said, "Did you ask for money to go for any participant I'm not aware of? Because they always come through me." And I said, "No." Well, within a few minutes we realized that her email was hacked and the paperwork was already sent in and processed. Thank goodness the carrier, the record keeper, was notified right away. They were able to find the money when it got to the first bank. It was honestly in the second bank, and after that it would have been gone forever. But it took 2 or 3 weeks for it to go back through the system, and the client was whole. About a year ago, another one of our clients got hacked, and I recommended them to Gary. And if you want to give a brief explanation as to that. Well, I don't say not capable of a brief explanation, simply to say, and Steve, of course, has been involved in this case as well, but unfortunately for the client, despite what seemingly were proper precautions, their accounts were invaded by a cyber invader and moved the money out to almost immediately to other banks. And what was interesting to see was that two of the banks, the reputable ones, they immediately caught what they thought was an improper transfer, and they brought it to our client's attention, and they reversed it. So good for those banks and good for our client. But the third bank, I'm not going to mention the name, I'll just say they're notorious for being very sloppy in their discipline, and the money went out. It hit that bank, and then out it went. And despite know your client and all these other precautions that they're supposed to be practicing, they let the money go. So now we're in litigation. Of course, that's not where you really want to be. So ultimately, I think the moral of the story is, if there is one, is that you need to be mindful of best practices and employ them at all times.
So we use a company called Know-Before, K-N-O-W-B-E with the number 4. That trains employees on being aware of phishing attempts to get into your machine, into your data, into whatever they can get into once they have you pulling down emails that are fake. There are training videos. We make every new employee go through the training videos. We actually phish our own employees. They come up with phishing emails. We agree to it. They send them out. They keep a record of who opens them up, etc. And then every couple of weeks we get a report that indicates here are all the people in your company. Here's the number of emails that went out. Here's how many people opened them up. Okay? And if people open them up, they get a discussion about how they shouldn't have opened it up. And if they do it again, then they have to go back into more training. So it's been very helpful for us because in the very beginning it was, what do we need this for? Until they realized that what you have to do to make sure that you're not you're not taken over by someone who spells Dunkin' Donuts with 2 different letters inside and you don't notice it because your eye sees it but it wants to see Dunkin' Donuts and it thinks it's Dunkin' Donuts. It shows you how to really look at an email and how to try and discern whether it's a real email or not from that sender. So that's worked out very well for us. It's very difficult for me working with clients who don't want to spend money to protect themselves. So if they have a retirement plan and you have to buy a fidelity bond, so you're a startup, and we say now you have to go to an insurance company and buy a fidelity bond to protect you and your employees. How much does that cost? That should cost about $100 first year because you don't have any assets. Oh, do I have to buy that now? Yeah. And you need it because when you do your reporting, they ask on that $5,500, do you have a fidelity bond and how much is it? Because you have to bond 10% of your assets as a minimum. So then the next thing comes up, this package that's in your pamphlet there, the Department of Labor best practices. And it says what every service provider, like us, said what we should be doing for cybersecurity reasons. And if you don't do it and you have a breach, you're going to be in trouble. And the deal doesn't mess around. They also talk about what a client has to do to vet the vendors that they're going to use to do the retirement plan. Whether it's Empower or T-Grow or the accounting firm that they use or whatever, it tells them what they have to do. Black and white. There are 12 things that are the best practices, and there are, I think, 5 or 6 things that are the suggested vetting things you have to do to vet.
Let me ask you a question. When people talk about best practices in the legal world, that's the standard against which you're going to be judged if something happens, right? It's not minimum, it's not the most. Best is what's considered an industry standard practice. And best practices mean a lot. And nothing will be perfect. No cybersecurity, no protection will be perfect. But best practices will include, substantial, call it compliance, substantially following what these best practices suggest. So they're really not suggestions, are they?
No, they're suggestions, but if you don't have them, it's a penalty. There's a penalty involved. Time, effort, and money. So when I have a problem having someone buy a $100 fidelity bond, and then you say, now, here's this new thing that came out from the Department of Labor, you should do this also. And they look at that and they find out that there's a cost a lot more than $100 to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'll do some of it, or I already have 2 or 3 of the 12, and I'm not going to do it anymore. I don't have to do it. But, I'll take my chances. That drives me nuts. And it's very difficult to overcome that. So I don't know if you see it in your practices, whether you're accountants or attorneys, but I see that daily in my practice with my clients. And it's a very difficult thing to get over. We have clients that are, in one plan in particular, where a lot of them are very old. And I'm a youth compared to some of them. A gentleman in his 90s with a $2.4 million balance in his pension account, and he won't take any emails. He doesn't want you to have his email address. Everything goes through his granddaughter. You can send her an email, but you can't send it to me, because they're going to hack my email. So I have to deal with the granddaughter who lives in a different state. She's very sweet on the phone. I don't know what she does. I don't know where she lives. I don't know anything about her. And I don't know how she monitors what she does for social media or anything else. But it scares the crap out of me that I'm negotiating or talking to this guy through his granddaughter. And it's one of those things that's overwhelming. But you have to deal with it somehow. Another issue is something that you talked about, Steve. We lease computers from one of the major manufacturers, not computers, copier printers. And in order, we print it, it's network printer, we have 3 big ones in the office, and you send a print job from your PC to the printer it goes to all of them at the same time, but you can only access it with a fob or a PIN code. So it's not like, you know what, because I would do this all the time. I print something out, it has client information on it, and it goes out immediately. It's printed out, if it was an old style copier. And if I remembered within the next hour or 2 to walk over and pick it up, that would be a win. So it doesn't come out of the copier until you go over to the copier and you log in with your pen and your file. That way we know that nobody's going to get that print job except the person that sent it there. Because if anybody else goes and they log in and they see what their print jobs are, they can call them out. So we have security on that. We have what they call a CFEX certification. In our industry, there's no, it's not like you're an accountant and you get a degree and you have to have CE and CPE and whatever it is, or attorneys, and you have to go through this. If you're in the third-party administration business and I'm sitting in front of you, and I'm in the business and I'm sitting in front of a potential client and they ask you the question, what kind of designation or what kind of license do you have in order to do TPA work? And I being the class clown as I was growing up, I take out my wallet and I give them my New Jersey driver's license, and I said, that's all I need. I can get to your office, I can talk to you, and I can drive back. I said, unfortunately, there's no standard. Well, a couple of years ago, a standard did come out. It was called CFEX. It's a combination with a brokerage company it's like an ISO 9000 type of thing. They come in, American Society of Pension Actuaries and Broadridge came up with this standard, and if you apply, they'll come out and they'll send an auditor to your office, and he spends 2 days there, and you go through, to fill out an application, et cetera, and it's not only do you have cybersecurity insurance, yes, it's an electronic thing, and you check off the box, and then it drops down and wants to know the insurance policy, and it wants to attach the face page and proof that it's paid. Okay? Do you have any kind of succession plan? Yeah, we have a buy-sell. Is it funded? Yes. How? Life insurance. We want to see the face page of the policy. We want to see that it's paid currently. So every question that they ask, that they can dig deeper to get more information about us, we have to fulfill that. So we applied in 2016. The gentleman came in, he went to audit us, and he spent 2 days there, and he looked at all the cameras, and he checked some files, and he interviewed every employee as to what they did, what they knew, what their experience was, what software programs they were using, et cetera, to make sure that what we told them on the application was true. Now when they hear he's coming in, everybody turns ashy white and starts cleaning their desk and taking the papers off their desk and things off the little magnetic things that they had there. And but when he came in, one of the things that fascinated us was when he said, "I'd like to see where the servers are." And our servers are in our utility room, where ADT boxes and public service meters. And first thing he said was, he goes, "The public service come in here and read these meters?" At the time they did, now it's automatic.
Let me ask you a question. You have fire extinguishers?
Yes.
Water?
No.
Good. So in a server room where you have electronics, the worst thing you can have is a sprinkler system as your fire protection. Most people don't realize it, but that won't help you if there is a problem, because everything will be fried.
But to make a long story short, he basically said, "Who stands here but the guy who reads the meters?" And usually I talk to him, because we live in the building, and I say, "Hey, how you doing? You want a bottle of water? It's hot out," that type of thing. And he takes him about 2 minutes, and he's gone. So, hey. And then he looks and he goes, "Oh, there's the ADT thing for the security system." He said, "They ever come do any work on that?" "Oh, yeah." He says, "Are they here for more than 5 minutes?" "Oh, yeah." He says, "Who stands here while they're here?" "You mean?" "Well, how do you know the guy doesn't take out a thumb drive and stick it in one of your servers and copy all the information?" That's the only room, not public, but sort of public room that we didn't have any cameras in. And he goes and looks around the building, and he looks around the room, and sees me, and he says, "Okay, I want a camera in that corner, and I want it going that way, and I want it here next year. By next year when I come, I'll actually take a picture of it after it's installed and send it to me." He says, "And I want a sign this big that said this room is under 24-hour surveillance, and I want it on the outside door." And as he's walking out, he goes, "Oh, here's the trash can with the wheels on it, and a bag in it, there's a mop. Whose is that?" "Oh, that belongs to Pedro, the guy that cleans twice a week." "Oh, is he bonded?" "Can he bond somebody?" So all of a sudden, we're becoming better businessmen because we're held to a standard that we never held ourselves to because we didn't know about stuff. Okay, so the CFEC certification, every year we have to reapply, and every year we have to pay a ridiculous fee. They're now coming out with cybersecurity. Because of this, there's a whole new cybersecurity section. So to do what we do and try and keep this product, the TPA product that we provide, and also keep the Department of Labor happy. The problem is that clients don't understand it, they don't know about it. We try and tell them, but it is an issue. So we do tell people that of the approximately 1,500, Sean, TPAs in the country, maybe a little bit less than that. There used to be a lot more, but they didn't get mergers and acquisitions. There are 48 TPAs that have applied for and qualified for the CFEC certification. We're one of them. So we're very proud of that, and we talk a lot about cybersecurity with our clients and other service providers.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Any questions, again, in line, just ask them. We're going to talk a little bit about legal and cybersecurity and all that other fancy stuff, and I'll try to keep my language as simple as possible, because otherwise I'll confuse myself. We have more acronyms in our business than, the way we meet is great. There are acronyms similar in cybersecurity, so I never know whether I'm buying choice or whether I'm buying a firewall. It's really very, very, very odd. But let me start by asking, how many people don't have cybersecurity insurance? Everybody has cyber. Don't be shy, because I'm going to tell you to get it. Like run, don't walk. Okay. Cyber insurance is important. You may have it as an accessory to your property and casualty or other insurance policies, but they're pretty much very, very, very small, very limited coverage. Your typical breach is going to cost you a couple $100,000 at least between remediation and possible notification costs, and that's good. So, so I am get cyber insurance. How many people have had to fill out forms in order to get renewed for cyber insurance? And let me hear from anybody. How involved were these applications? We call them attestations. So long? Was it kind of painful to answer? Like lots of interesting questions about how you manage your data? Anybody? Yes?
CFO is very challenging question for all IT roles, so I know CTO involved.
You have to get your CTO involved to answer that.
Very technical, there's a lot of
So
very onerous.
and the more insurance you want, the more involved these questionnaires you get. These questionnaires are important because they really ask you to represent what the status of your system is about. So you really have to be very careful. You have to read the language. Typically, get your lawyer. I'm not soliciting here, but really, if you don't understand the language, it will work to your disadvantage. That's the way insurance policies work. And if it looks like you've made any misrepresentation on these policies for cybersecurity, your carrier will not only possibly reject your claim, but maybe rescind your entire policy. And that's happened. And actually, it's been litigated. But I will tell you, love props. My firm, in order to do business with one of our clients, had to fill out a spreadsheet with what we do. How long did it take, Tom? A month to get this answer? In order to do business, we spent more time answering this for our client than we do business with our client. If we had to bill the amount of time, they would have had to pay us. But props aside, you need cyber insurance. You need, because looking back in retrospect, you're going to wish you had it in the event you get hacked, right? And the question, and ask anybody in the cybersecurity industry, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? And to what degree. And if you're lucky enough to have a long period of time before that happens, that's great, but it doesn't mean that that you can be complacent about it. I'm responsible on the legal side for my firm's cybersecurity, and I'm the person who gets the 3 a.m. call in addition to our CISO. But let's talk about what it means to even have cybersecurity. First of all, cybersecurity is all about knowing about risk and knowing what your risks are, right? So yeah, very simple understanding, very simple concept. And with cybersecurity, it's kind of like building a house with 12 doors and you put locks on 11 of them. That is not pretty secure, okay? That you use that analogy when you think about cybersecurity, because if you have a hole in your system, that hole is probably a well-known exploit that will pretty much soon be exploited and used as an attack vector. Trish, can you say? Okay. So know your risks, but how do you know your risks? And what do you do? What do you do in advance of having a cyber attack? How do you prepare?
And my practice in the main has been to counsel clients before they have a problem. My experience comes out of the plaintiff side. I've been involved in the target data breach on the plaintiff side, on Facebook, Cambridge Analytica litigation, and the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management litigation. And it's pretty ugly when you get sued, because the discovery that takes place and about the victim organization is especially intrusive and expensive. So I counsel my clients on how to avoid me, because it's either you see me now or see me later. But pretty much I'm on the defense side, and what we do is we get brought in together with a technology expert, someone on the real cyber side, who basically will investigate your system, do an assessment, do a risk assessment, find out, we all know what gap analysis is. Well, there are gaps in your security as well. They'll identify gaps, they'll prioritize your gaps, and then they will, and then recommend remedial action. Is it cost-free? No. But the costs on the backside, when your regulators come after you, or your clients come after you, or your employees come after you, is something that can run into a lot of money. And believe it or not, even with your $1 million, $2 million, maybe even $5 million of cyber insurance, which is pretty much the norm these days, that can run out pretty quickly, right? So, so what do? So we come in and we'll actually sit for a day with both your administrative staff as well as your management, and talk about how you run your business, talk about who has access to your computers, create what we call a network map. Where are all the endpoints? Where are all those points where you can have a compromise, an identity compromise start? Where can that attack begin? Because as a rule, by the time you realize that you've been hacked, the threat actor has been in your system scouring around for weeks and possibly even months. So the idea is to put all of these protections in place before it happens. And you do it, by the way, you do it once a year at minimum. Why do you do it once a year? Because your environment changes, your employees change, your equipment changes, right? Your applications change, your vendors might change. Each of those we call them environmental factors, each of those environmental factors can have a significant effect on your cybersecurity posture. Right? So we recommend that once a year you get an assessment and act on the assessment. Why do the assessment? Hey, yeah, you can get sued, but what are the bases for being sued? Well, you have fiduciary liability, right? So there's one cause of action, and Gary can talk about that in a bit. In fact, I'll let him talk about that now, and I'll go into some others. Yeah. Again, ask questions, please.
Okay, so I don't know if your head is swimming with all this stuff, but I think it probably is. We have all these acronyms that we use, various types of programs, types of bugs that can inflict your computer systems, and it's a little bit mind-boggling, to say the least. But over the years, I've always preached to my clients, look, business is the art of taking risks. And that means that you have to know what the risk is in the first instance. Okay, if you don't know that, you're not taking a risk, you're merely exposing yourself. That's not a good way to go. So, we have, my focus is on the qualified planning side of this. And as it is, most people sign up, they sign the adoption agreement, the joiner agreement, and they really get no counseling on what does this mean that I've adopted this plan for my business. Well, as I alluded to earlier, ERISA created a whole wealth of risks and expectations. And that includes the Labor Department's best practices. Now, if you have a larger plan, perhaps you have an auditor that is required for the purpose of preparing the 5500. I'd be curious to know whether the auditor is asking about what are you doing in terms of the best practices on cyber. By the way, if you're a smaller plan, even though you're not required, you'd be more than well advised to take this into account anyhow and get somebody who's qualified to advise you on how do I go about doing this and what else, what other best practices, not just the ones that the government supplied, but that, you know, an expert, hopefully a qualified expert, could help you to adopt and employ. So the risk of ERISA is great. The risk of cyber attack, intrusion is monumental. So I'll give you some statistics here on this. First of all, the United States holds the record for the most amount of reports of cyber attacks on a yearly basis. Last year, they reported 571,000 attacks that were filed with the FBI there. Now, the second place winner in that dubious distinction is the UK. They were like 200 and some odd thousand. All of Europe is less than, we exceed all of the rest of Europe, which is really mind-boggling. So we're the targets. And in my mind, I come to think about this as the barbarians that are at the gates. This is a threat to us as a culture, as an economic economy, as well as a society. We're being assaulted on a daily basis. So we should recognize that that is the reality. And the reality dictates that we do something affirmative about that risk, or else we're really exposing ourselves. And believe me, you're not going to like it when that is realized, you know, because it happens. And for those people who have had, you know, ransomware and other attacks and have suffered the damage, it can be devastating. It can be an ending of a business. It could be a bankruptcy event. Okay? In addition to which, because ERISA not only imposes personal liability on you as fiduciaries, but also there's fee shifting. So now you're looking at many times when there's fee shifting, the largest measure of the damages are actually the attorney's fees. So you don't want to be in that place. But in order to get there, you know, at least have some modicum of protection, you have to do your due diligence and you have to take whatever precautions that you can. So it isn't sufficient just to sit on your hands and say, gee, I'm worried about this. You have to do something affirmatively. And that includes, you know, on all levels, whether it be your TPA, whether it be your actuary, whether it be your lawyers, your accountants, etc. And also computer advisors. I mean, ultimately, hopefully have those. So, you know, I often tell people, look, this thing that we all carry around, we didn't carry around this thing 25 years ago. But we all carry one of these around. What is it? It's a computer. Okay? It has lots of information on it. And I said to my IT department recently, he said, look, you know, I know this is configured, but honestly, I don't understand all the ins and outs of how to configure this computer. Could you do me a favor and sit with me, take a look at this, and see what I did right and what I did wrong? And I think that we need to carry that over into all the things that we do, not just the pensions, but also our business in general. But let's go back to the pension for a second. Here's a statistic. We have a lot of private qualified plans. It's qualified, which means that you have to comply with requirements of both the Internal Revenue Code as well as the Labor Code. Now, these qualified plans, we all want to have our 401ks, we all want to be able to retire with some security. And there's $12 trillion in those private plans. $12 trillion. It's a lot of money. Very attractive target for the bad guys. And unfortunately, to a large degree, we're not up to the challenge. We're the amateurs, at best. And in many ways, amateurs that pay no attention to this at all, which is foolish. But $12 trillion, that's a very attractive target for the bad people to go after. Now, The FBI last year, 2023, also reported $12.9 billion of losses out of qualified plans. And as our client, in the case that we mentioned, and will learn and is learning, and actually, they're wonderful people. They stepped up to the bar the very first day that they realized that the money was taken out, and they replaced it so that none of their participants would suffer.
From their own
any loss.
funds.
That doesn't happen every day. In fact, it's an incredibly rare event. And fortunately for them, they had money to be able to do it. We're not talking about a small sum of money. But they said, we don't want our participants to lose their retirement money. We're going to put it back in the second time. And I don't think that's tax deductible when you put it in for the second time. So the bottom line is that we have to be mindful of these things. We have to understand that we're under attack. This isn't just about passive, don't do anything, don't think about it. You engage in that type of activity, you're going to pay the price. And the amount of intrusions, the amount of attacks is increasing by the day. So this is not a rare event. So ultimately, you need to understand what is your risk. Go back to the beginning. You want to be artful and hopefully a business person that not only survives but succeeds. Well, you have to understand that this is on your agenda. And this is something that must be done. It's not an option. And furthermore, I also understand it isn't just what you have to do, it's what your participants, your employees have to do, because they have to understand, anytime they push a button on a computer, anytime they push a button on their iPhone, they better understand the implications of that, and also understand how that might implicate you or expose you. So I think that ultimately the moral of the story is wake up and be cognizant of these things and start to deal with those in a very constructive and positive way.
So we keep talking about risk, right? How do we deal with risk? There are really a few ways we can deal with risk, right? We can accept the risk, say, yeah, the liability, the attendant liability of taking this risk is much lower than taking the risk it takes. It's a parking ticket. It's the way you have to look at it. You can mitigate the risk. Mitigating the risk means you have to take some measure to reduce the possibility of whatever threat you've identified from happening, right? Mitigation is what we're talking about today because there are risks that we need to take. We're online all day, every day, right? That's a risk in and of itself. What measures are we taking to reduce our potential liability for risk, for those risks? We can transfer risk. How do you transfer risk? What's a good way to transfer your risk? Anybody? Insurance. That's one. Another means. I'm asking you to be lawyers now, so. Contract, right? What in the contract can let you transfer risk? Pardon? Hold on, indemnification clause, or disclaimer, or a waiver. Lots of different things can help you transfer risk. Some risks you can't transfer. Some risks you can't transfer. We'll talk about that. What about, but one thing you can't do is avoid a risk. Well, you can avoid a risk by not engaging with it. One thing you can't do is be ignorant of a risk, right? There's no excuse for being ignorant of a risk. Like ice skating in a pond in the springtime and not caring. That's accepting it. But not knowing that a risk exists is problematic. These are the quote-unquote unknown unknowns. So the idea behind a risk assessment is identifying those risks, and that's where your cyber expert or your attorneys come in before an event, so you have quote-unquote attorney-client privilege over that, keep it confidential. And it also helps you show defensibility by having engaged in that risk assessment, by having identified those risks. Will it be perfect? No. No implementation is ever perfect. Right? Let's be clear about that. So How many of you have handled New Yorkers' information? People who live in New York. Anybody? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Ever heard of General Business Law 899 BB? Of course not. You know, only geeks like me would know that, right? So 899 BB? Anyway, 899 BB basically says that if you handle any information in New York, or any, no matter where you are, no matter what state you're in, if you handle sensitive information, your usual personally identifiable information, you must have reasonable security. And how do you show reasonable security? By demonstrating that you have appropriate technical, administrative, and physical controls to compensate, mitigate those risks, right? And what's the downside of violating New York General Business Law 899 BB? The state attorney general comes after you and basically takes you up for $2, $3, $4 million. They've come after law firms. They've come after other organizations. So if you think that you're only responsible for complying with your ERISA obligations, there are other obligations that ERISA doesn't preempt. There are other complicating statutes that you now have to be aware of. And then, if you have a problem, if you have a breach, you may have notification requirements. You may have notification requirements both to the victims as well as to the authorities, as well as to the state. So there's a whole complex of obligations that you now have because you handle both sensitive information and you handle funds that are connected with them. So suing to recover these is tough because if it's a business account that you keep those funds in, you're covered by the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, which favors the bank more than it favors you in the event you've been hit with some sort of fraudulent activity, such as an identity compromise. The bank's going to blame you. They always blame you. You've done this, you didn't have that, you didn't have that. I got to tell you, banks are not really that careful either. And we're involved in various litigation, which the banks have screwed up. But this is litigation that clients now have to pay our billing rate plus experts plus discovery. It's not fun. So the idea of taking care in advance of all of these things happening becomes paramount. And I have to tell you that walking a client through a cybersecurity incident is always painful. It's like grief counseling, as much as it is lawyering. And I would like to avoid that for my clients, for our clients, and Gary does, as much as possible. And so we close with just be careful out there. Whatever you take away, whatever questions you have, just email me or any one of us. I guess maybe you don't email the FBI. But ask questions, and we're happy to answer them. I want to thank you all for coming out and having breakfast with us and listening to us talk about acronyms and stuff. I want to wish you all a great day. Thanks.
Just asking if anyone has.
So now, okay, Ida, why don't you talk? Because you're in charge.
Does anyone have any questions?
Or you can come up individually or run for the hills, whatever you like. All right, thanks again.